We have 30 minutes for our discussion about Sierra versus Lucasfilm games. So when we were talking yesterday, David told me that don't ask me about my favorite games because I didn't play too much. So it would be hard to talk about specific titles. So maybe we could talk more generally. My question would be, how do you recall those times when Lucasfilm started? Did you compare with Sierra at the time? You were frustrated that you heard that their circulations are 10 times higher than yours?
Yeah, right.
How it was?
Yeah, so Sierra had been doing text adventures first and then graphic adventures. We even had them back in our computer center where we would have a bunch of, on one of our apples, we had their very first graphic adventure, which was really line drawings with text parser. So they've been building up an audience for at least 5 years, 7 years before we did our first adventure game. So they had a great audience in the United States. So we came out with ours, immediately we compared it to their sales. I don't know if they even noticed that we were around doing any of this initially. But it wasn't really until we started doing translations of our games and distributed them in Europe that I think they became popular, which I think is one of the reasons why more people know our games here than they do in the States in terms of the audience. I don't know if you know this, but I always assumed that they didn't do translations because it would have been much harder to translate the parser.
Your games were translated in German, from LucasArts, and French, but the Sierra, I think there was no German versions of Sierra games, yeah? It was all in English language,
okay.
And then I think the LucasArts was first to, translate their games in the European languages, yeah?
So that would also explain why Germany was one of the strongest markets for us, because
they were.
Right. Although I still hear from people that say they learned English by playing our games, because there was enough motivation to get through it and understand what was happening.
I think the Last Crusade or Monkey Island were more popular in Germany than in, for example, the UK. Yeah, right. Germany was a great market for adventure games, but it was at the end of the 80s, at the beginning of the 90s. Yeah, but when we're talking about the beginning of the 80s, what was the first Sierra game you played?
I remember it being a mystery.
Mr. House.
Mystery House?
Mr.
Okay.
House, it's from 1980.
Yes.
It's the first Sierra Online game, first adventure game.
Right, so we had that at our computer center. So people could rent time on our computers and play that game.
You played it on Apple II?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that I finished it. I think I played it for a while, but and saw what they were doing and thought it was interesting. I was doing adaptations of Scott Adams' text adventures. He originally did the Radio Shack versions, and then we did it. They're written in BASIC, so we did the AppleSoft BASIC. Didn't have all the commands that the Radio Shack one did, so we created this extension to AppleSoft where you could do if then else and string search and a few other things that his required.
Okay.
And then actually sold that as a standalone product through Scott Adams' company. But did a lot of that was probably how I learned about game design, was by tearing into the code of someone else's game to see what they did.
Oh yeah, Mitch?
For me, when Lucasfilm game started, it was quite a little strange situation because Lucasfilm was a huge company making a lot of millions of dollars on Star Wars. So it's a presumption that if they wanted to enter the market with huge impact, it could smash Sierra because Sierra was only Sierra. But it was strange that Lucasfilm was losing this competition when comparing circulations, because if George Lucas could give some more millions of dollars, it could probably be quite a different situation.
Well, I think, well, first of all, whereas they made lots of money doing the movies, the company itself was maybe 600 or 700 people, so it wasn't a huge company. And I think George was open to doing the games because he saw a future where maybe games and movies would kind of intersect, but he wasn't a huge supporter of games. So I think his edict to us was to stay small, don't lose money, and to kind of learn the technology. So I don't think there was this huge goal on his part to dominate the market in that area. It's a good question, though. I never really thought of it back then. So we didn't throw lots of money into marketing. I think it was what the appropriate was, what was appropriate for the time. But it was also the resistance. Like you said, we do one of our games in the United States, and Sierra would release one of their games, and they'd have 10 times sales that we did. And that was frustrating. We played softball. We invited them to the ranch, and we had a softball game on the softball field at the ranch, and they beat us there too. So.
Okay, David, was there a feeling of competition between LucasArts and Sierra back in the days, like you were feeling like they are, up high up there, and you were trying to, surprise them with your adventure games, or was it like, okay, they are producing the good adventure games, and we're making our own? Yeah. Was it a hard competition or something like?
I think it was. If there was a competition, I'm guessing it was mostly from our point of view rather than from theirs. And we did watch. Ron Gilbert would make sure to play all their games as they came out, and he would then show us interesting parts from the games rather than having us all go through all of them. And I remember while we were doing indie, for example, we saw one of their games that had a lot more special case animation than we were doing at the time. And we realized, okay, to compete, to stay competitive, we better do a lot more animation than we're doing. So we went back and redid a bunch of scenes with a lot more animation.
Okay, me too.
Yesterday we were talking about Loom, that this game was shorter than the others. It was for 7 hours or so. And generally the games at the era were tough. You cannot finish it in most cases without solution. So maybe it was a good idea to make simpler games, because I checked it yesterday. Loom wasn't flop. Loom sold about 500,000 copies on PC itself, I think. So it was a huge success, the biggest success of Lucasfilm at the time. So maybe it was an idea and a way to compete with Sierra, to make more easier games and more to casual gamers.
I think it was more of a critically the critics liked the game, but we were always getting this feedback that it was too short. So at the time, I think the expectation was you pay $30, $40, $50 for a game, you get at least 30 or 40 hours of gameplay. So when people paid that much for the Loom and they only got like 5 or 6 or 7 hours, we got a lot of negative feedback about that. And I think going forward, we really didn't do that again. Brian was going to do a trilogy, and he ended up leaving the company soon after, and no one else. I think someone else started to do it, but we kind of just stopped doing that one. I think it was a great introduction to adventure game playing, because it was much more approachable for a lot of people. But I don't think maybe we didn't market it properly, in that we didn't tell people what the expected experience would be. So we got a lot of pushback, maybe after they bought it.
Okay, then, David, what was that with Ron Gilbert and the article at Grumpy Gamer, that what do you hate about adventure games and so on? How was that? What game was Ron playing to write something like that Was it that it was all Sierra games or one
He basically
special
plays,
Sierra game?
he plays
What
a
was
lot of
it?
games. He may not finish all of them, but
Okay.
and he still does this. He'll pick up a game, he'll play through for a while until he gets the sense of the game, and then maybe put it aside. Back then, he probably would play through at least part of the games, but I don't know if he finished them all. But enough where some of the formative ideas about arbitrary death and I just felt personally when I played a Sierra game, and I gave that example before of having to walk up a staircase and not guiding it properly and fall off the staircase.
You can slide down and kill yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like if there's things I could do in real life successfully, I should be able to do them in adventure games successfully too. So I always got the impression that the designers maybe were looking for ways to extend gameplay by creating a lot more depth.
Creating them harder, harder to play.
Yeah,
like you kill yourself by falling off the stairs or down the drain, for example. Yeah.
and these would be deaths that weren't telegraphed ahead of time. So you would die in a way which maybe wouldn't be obvious, and I always saw it as kind of unfair. So I didn't want to do that in my games.
Okay, Mitch.
Paweł mentioned about Ron Gilbert. As far as I remember, making of Maniac Mansion started from that moment that Ron Gilbert played or has seen King's Quest first or second part or third part. So it was a very close connection between Sierra and LucasArts, because Ron wanted to make the same game but in a better way, not for children but for, I don't know, juveniles or more adult people. So he put many popular culture jokes in the game, so it was not so smooth history that Prince of Daventry and so on, but was more refined version of that game. But the skeleton, the basics were the same of the game of Maniac Mansion and King's Quest.
Well, I never played King's Quest, so I can't comment on that. So I don't know how they compare. I mean, I know that he wanted to do a big game where you could choose characters, but I never saw that there was a comparison between the two games, other than that they're both graphic adventures. But maybe, I don't know, since I haven't played it, I don't know.
And I remember the first in-game joke about Sierra was in Secret of Monkey Island, where first some people were talking about I don't know. No, it was about Loom, about these pirates in the tavern.
But in Monkey Island, the joke about Sierra was with the rubber tree. You were falling off the cliff, and then there is a restore, restart, and quit.
Yes.
And whatever you choose, it's the Guybrush comes back at the ravine. And
the other one was when you were underwater and you cannot die, because in Sierra games you die often, and this time he couldn't die.
But you know what? After 10 minutes you will die, because Guybrush can hold his breath only for 10 minutes, yeah? that was the second.
It was a deliberate use of in-game joke connecting with Sierra, so Sierra responded with the same. I remember in one of Space Quest were books, I think, about the...
It was in Space Quest 4 in the Space Mall. There were games like, it was like Boom.
Parody of Loom.
It was a Boom. And there was a King's Quest 26 or 27. And there was from LucasArts, there was also Where in the World is Jaime Lipschitz or something like that. There was in the bargain bin the games that were, mocked up.
We used this screen in Pixel magazine when you were writing an article.
I know that. It was from Space Quest 4. Yeah, okay then. Could you please tell us, that everyone know that the Annie in Zack McCracken it was your wife, yeah? The Annie in Zack McCracken. Who are the two girls? It was only a fantasy, a fiction, or someone real?
They weren't based on other people, but they were named after. So Melissa was the name of Ron's girlfriend, and she had a doctorate in China studies, so her name in the game was Melissa China.
Okay.
Leslie was Matt's girlfriend's name, and she was actually one of the play testers on Zach. And every other week she'd come in with her hair color a different color. Kind of punk style, but it would be different colors. So in the game, every time she takes off her helmet, her hair is a different color. So that was it. But other than that, there's really no personality, I think, that tied in with them. Annie, maybe a little bit more, just because she was in my mind when I wrote the lines. I would probably think of how would she respond. And her name was Annie Laris, which was my wife's maiden name. That was her name before she was a fox. So.
Wow. Okay.
I also wanted to say something that when we were doing Thimbleweed Park together, I did I was thinking that bit with the adventure game, the Sierra game I had played, where I picked up a broken mirror piece and died. So there's a piece in the flashback for Dolores where she opens the refrigerator and there's broken ketchup bottles. And she has this little rant where she says, hey, if this were a Sierra online game, I pick up these, I would be dead now. And that was me kind of digging it back to that. Figured that she would know, she would have played all their games.
I think the turning point in Lucasfilm history was the decision that you cannot be distributing by Activision or Electronic Arts, but you must do it by yourselves. So Sierra was distributing its games by themselves. So you also I think it was about Maniac Mansion premiere in 1987. You also decided that you want to make it by yourself. So your fame aroused at the time, I think.
Yeah, but in Europe, I think we were using Activision as the distributor. So even though we were distributing, we were always the publisher from Maniac Mansion on. But I think that Activision distributed the games in Europe because we didn't have a channel to do that. So it was still published by Lucasfilm games, but distributed by them. So was the question, why did we do that? Or
the question would be that this was the moment that you were able to compete with Sierra much more effectively than in the previous times.
Yeah, I think initially we were being a little cautious, and we weren't sure if we wanted to build an entire publishing company to do these. So, the first games, Atari theoretically was going to be the publisher. That changed because the Tremillos bought Atari, and so we ended up pulling the disc version and having Epics to publish that for us.
And did you ever on a CES or Game Developers Conference met ever in person any of the Williams family? So we are waiting for any anecdote.
Say it again?
Williams family, Ken Williams or Roberta Williams. Did you ever met?
Yeah, well, so we had a softball game. Like I said, we're at the ranch where we invited their team to play our team, and they crushed us. They beat us. Also, we invited Ken and Roberta to the screening of Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade at the ranch, along with a whole bunch of journalists and other people, and I think we were showing the game at the same time. And I think the anecdote I heard was that when they saw the movie and realized that it was about the Grail Diary, or finding the Grail, they were really upset because they were working on a game that was also focused on the Grail at the same time. And it would be really hard to compete with Indy with that story.
Okay then, and could you please tell us, like from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when there was a Venice, there was a castle, and there was something like traveling from the castle to the place where the Grail is. Was there a moment in the design of the game that you think about, like you said, killing Indy is something bad, or was it like, okay, I'm snapping my fingers, I'm killing Indy right now and in the castle,
I think the only place, am I right about this? It's been a while since I played it, but I think the place where you could do it is if you have Indy try to punch Hitler,
Yeah.
and then the guard with machine guns shoot Indy.
Okay, the punch fights were a little bit tedious in Indy, but for example, when you pull something like that, like the cork in the Venice, then the water will kill you instantly. But the death of the main hero is like you can kill the heroes in Maniac Mansion. You can do that when you fill the pool with water, with someone inside. Yeah, you can kill the Indy. I don't remember. Could you kill Zach?
Yeah, there are a couple places where he could die. I mean, if he jumps out of the airplane without a parachute, that would probably be a death. Also, if he jumps out with a parachute but without a kazoo, then he can't call the dolphin.
And he will die in the water, yeah?
He'll die in the water. So yeah, there are a couple places. There might have been a bug or two also which we hadn't thought about where you could die. But this is before we were trying to do games where you didn't die.
Yeah, because the Monkey Island is like the first game when the hero can be only killed like staying longer than 10 minutes in the water. But the Maniac, the Indy, and the Zack, in every game you can kill your hero. Yeah, it's like the Sierra, but it's a little bit less harsh. Yeah.
Yeah,
you can only die like 2 or 3 times in a game, not like 100 times. Right.
So in Maniac Mansion, there's places where you could die also, and usually it was, I know this is going to kill me, but I want to try it anyway. Where in Sierra, I think often it was a surprise death because you didn't know that this was going to kill you. So we wanted to make sure you could do something dangerous if you wanted to, and we would reward you by killing you, but we didn't want to make it arbitrary or a surprise.
When we were yesterday wandering through the streets of Warsaw and talking, I remember there was a case of the dig, because after Indiana Jones's Last Crusade, you were almost at the same level that Sierra was, because I think it was the first game that sold more than 1 million copies, as far as I remember. So the next project was The Dig, the project by Steven Spielberg. It was, in theory, it was the biggest franchise that could ever happen in video game, because famous film director, very nice subject, not used in the TV series because it was too expensive for TV series. So on the paper it was a base for the huge success, but something went very, very wrong in this project, and all these Lucasfilm games started, you as a band of friends started to dissolve in certain way in the moment. It is my opinion, of course, but it was a moment that Lucasfilm wanted to beat Sierra with such huge subject, and then instead of it started to dissolve.
Yeah, I don't see a relationship to the Dig and people leaving the company. For example, Ron Gilbert never was involved with the Dig, yet he wanted to go off and do children's graphic adventure games without having to do it for the company. We weren't getting royalties or anything, so we were all getting salary, and that was pretty much, that was it. So if you thought you could do something on your own for a company, then there'd be some motivation to leave in order to create your own business to do that. So that was, I think, the motivation for Ron, but also to not have someone else suggesting what he should do. In my case, it wasn't tied to the Dig, since I also didn't work on it. In 1990, I went to a different group, started a new group to do location-based entertainment, like an immersive flight simulator type thing. And that was kind of my dream project, and worked on that for a couple years, got a prototype ready to go, and then we realized that it was just going to be too expensive to pull it off, and the project was closed down, and I left the company. I know that various people worked on the Dig. I think there were 3 or 4 different designers over the years, and they each one tried it, and it just kind of got, it was a tough project to pull off. So since I wasn't involved, I'm not sure exactly what happened.
Paul, maybe the last question and some questions from the audience.
Okay, then the last question from me is: what is your most favorite Sierra game? Yours. Tough question, I know.
It's tough because I haven't played them. So, so really, I got so frustrated with the games, I would throw up my hands and say, don't want to do it. So the only one I played more was probably the very first one, the mystery one.
But you were playing Sierra games, yeah, at the time.
Just a little bit, but I played a little bit, and then I'd get angry at it for killing me, and I'd say, I have better things to do than do that. So I just felt my personal philosophy how a game was supposed to go was so dramatically different that I didn't want to put my time into it. So I never got enamored with any of them because of that.
Okay,
so I don't have a favorite.
Okay, then thank you, David.
Okay. Kruger gave me signal that we have about 5 minutes, so maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Hi, I would like to ask a question about the name of Zack McCracken. Where did the name of the character come from?
Okay, where the name of the character Zack McCracken come from? In the original design, his name was, what was it? Oh, I just lost it. Is it Julian? Anyway, it wasn't Zack. And the game wasn't quite as funny as in the original design. All the elements were there. So we ended up, Ron said that he'd like to have a meeting, and let's brainstorm on kind of punching up the humor a bit more. And during that meeting, we actually used a Marin County phone book and found one character, some person's name called Zach, another someplace else, McCracken, and now to say, yeah, those are good names, so let's put those together. And we also named the game got named in that meeting. Talked about what the aliens were doing, their mind bending. Okay, so let's call it Zach McCracken and the alien mind bender. So that came out of that brainstorm meeting. And his job went from being a mainstream media reporter from like a large regular newspaper to like a tabloid, cheap tabloid that puts lies into their paper all the time. And we thought that would give us a lot more freedom to get wacky with it. So you just kind of shifted the whole thing a little bit and made it funnier. But it was pretty much the same game, but just with a push in that direction.
Somebody else?
Oh, Jason. His name was Jason originally. Jason, the news reporter.
Hello. I have a question and a little request, because Thimbleweed Park was great. And where there'll be another one like this, another game like Thimbleweed Park, and please, the request is please make the little one.
So I don't know. Thimbleweed Park was really Ron and Gary's initial project, and they did a Kickstarter. The idea was kind of to go back to the old style games, but with what we learned presently. And once we saw the Kickstarter was past its initial goal, then he invited me on and Mark Ferrari for the background art. And it's a huge amount of fun to work with him again. I wasn't sure whether we would still have that connection, because it had been 25 years since we had worked together on anything. And after the first few minutes of brainstorming, everything kind of fell into place. It could be Ron's call if he would ever do it again. I know he's off doing something else right now, but it's a lot of work. And he probably put more work in than anyone else, because he was basically the project leader for this. So who knows? I don't know. I think everyone who worked on the game would love to work together as a team again, but there's nothing on the horizon right now to make that happen. Doing it as a Kickstarter was also even more work to get that, just for all the the transparency that we were trying to do, all the blog posts and the podcasts. If you haven't checked that stuff out, all those are still up, and it's almost like taking a master course in game design by going through all the processes that we went through. So at least there's that.
Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David.